Hi, my name is Anderly Penwell, and I'm the executive producer of tonight's show, Covering Tragedy, here on GUTV. Thank you so much for joining in tonight, but unfortunately, it's for a sad reason. With the recent events at Freeman High School and in Las Vegas, we thought it would be interesting to have a conversation about how the media covers tragedy. We'd like to thank the GUTV alumni guests for being here today, and we look forward to the conversation that we're having.
My name is Julie Moreno, and today you're watching a GUTV special on Covering Tragedy. For the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to be engaged in a conversation focusing and hearing from 4 GUTV alumni about their experiences and their most recent tragedy, the Freeman High School shooting. We hope today to gain perspectives, knowledge, and insights that we can take back here in the studio, that our future broadcast members who will watch this program eventually learn, and also to help you, the viewer, learn what goes through the mindset of a reporter and also those who are shooting and filming in the newsroom. I would like to first welcome our first guest, Mr. Rob Harris, who's a CREM reporter. Hello, Rob. We also have Aaron Robinson, who is the executive producer of the CREM Morning Show. We have Corinne Cahill, who is a producer for KHQ, and we also have Katie Carl, who works at the assignment desk for KHQ as well. Now, to my right here, I am joined by Professor Dan Garrity, who is the Director of Broadcast Studies, and Professor Tamara McGregor, who is an adjunct Broadcast Studies professor. Now, I want to start with you, Professor Dan. Anderly, our EP, touched on it a little bit of why we wanted to have this show today, and you were really the driving force in that. So what's your commitment statement for this show?
Lessons learned. It was wonderful in a weird way to see what our alumni did during the coverage of the Freeman shooting. And it's important, I think, for our viewers to understand we are able to examine an event from a variety of perspectives. And we should examine the Freeman tragedy from a sociological perspective and from a historical perspective. But this program right now is really just meant to examine it from a broadcast journalism perspective. And when you do that, you'll find that our alumni did an exemplary job. And I saw it unfold night after night on the evening news as I watched their reports. And it occurred to me that I just didn't want these lessons to be lost and to somehow archive them and to do it in a way that also enhances your educational process, I suppose.
No, I understand totally. Now, before we go to the alumni, Tamara, I want to ask you, just in case our viewers don't know what happened in the Freeman High School shooting,
Sure.
Can you give us just like a quick summary of what happened?
Sure. There was a young man who went to school that morning, packed a backpack with a semi-automatic weapon and a pistol, and went to school. It was his first day back from being suspended. Went to school and opened fire in the hallways of Freeman, taking down 2 girls standing in the hallway, another down the hall, and then killing a young man before he was apprehended.
Thank you. Now, Aaron, I want to start with you because I know you are the executive producer of the morning show. So just take us through, what was it like for you when you heard that this was going on?
Yeah, so when we first heard the call, the scanner call is reported shooting, stabbing, stand back. And then we heard all of the dispatchers and WSP was sent out, the sheriff's office, the police department, and then we heard the helicopter come in. And oftentimes when you hear all of those resources called, it's often a training. So we originally thought, oh man, they're just training, it's something's going on. But then we noticed that the scanner called out Freeman High School. And so in trainings, they don't call out the location. So we knew right then and there that we were dealing with something that was going to be awful. So Rob had just walked back into the newsroom. We had just wrapped up our morning show at that point. And Rob walked in, and I said, hey, I need you to grab your gear and head to Freeman High School right now. We've had a reported shooting, and I think we'd heard that there was one dead on arrival at that time, so we knew that it was very serious. I mean, any situation like this is serious, but we knew it was going to be even worse than we wanted it to be at that point. So we had Rob out, and then all of our reporters were kind of walking in the door at that moment, and it was just like a mad dash to get everybody out the door. We sent all of our resources out there, and I think within about 15 minutes of getting Rob out the door, we had some information confirmed, and we actually went straight to air. So at that point, with coverage like that, you don't have scripts. You have basic supers, and you have anchors at the desk just working to confirm information. They're just repeating and repeating the stuff that they do know, and working with the producer in the booth, and our crews were just kind of going with the flow at that time. But I think by the end of the day, we were in coverage for, I don't even know, multiple hours. It was, I think, at least 7 straight. And then we had our evening anchors come in. They went out into the field. They were talking to families and students, and yeah, it was just awful. I mean, you don't really have time to let your emotions kind of do their thing at that time. You're just kind of under so much stress and anxiety, and your adrenaline kicks in, and you're kind of in work mode. And it wasn't until many, many hours later that I had time to really process what had happened.
And Rob, I want to, because she mentioned that you just come in and they're finishing a show, and all of a sudden now you're hearing about what happened in Freeman High School, and she mentioned a lot of adrenaline and going into work mode. But can you describe how you were feeling during that situation?
Yeah, well, and so she had mentioned that at first we thought it was a training, and so it happened right at the time where I'm coming in to start editing my story for the next day. Other dayside reporters are coming out to get started on their day, and we had also known that they had done a training at Freeman the day before, which ended up being a huge part of the story. But so I remember this a little bit differently from you. I remember you coming to me and saying, there may or may not be something going on at Freeman. Can you go check it out? And I was like, well, no, I can't do that. I have things to do. Thank you very much. I mean, I didn't say that, but that's what's going through my head.
Sure.
And then we heard that second round where they're calling for every agency under the sun. And she's like, you need to go out there. And so then your heart just starts beating, because this was the one thing that I had to pin my stomach for covering. Like, there's a lot of things that you don't want to cover, but a school shooting was the thing that I just dreaded. But when you get on scene, there's just so much happening that you don't have time to think about anything. I'm getting emotional now, and I wasn't emotional that day. But you see everyone just sort of having the worst moment of their life, but also going to that place. Like, you have every agency there, and you have law enforcement telling you where you need to go, but also thanking you and recognizing your role in that. You have parents coming up to you asking when they can see their kid, how many are dead, and you're having to tell them, I don't know. Even if you do know, kind of, you've heard things, but you don't want to report something that ends up being false. And that's another hard part of it, is hearing things from so many different people, but you're not able to report it yet. So you just have to go back to everything you learned in school and just stick with, how do I know this? How do I really know this? How does the person that told me that know this? And understand that no one, I don't think, would ever try to intentionally deceive you, but in those moments, the students coming out of that school have gone through hell, and they're probably going to remember things wrong. And so just because they tell you something doesn't necessarily mean that you should report it. So that's really I think the hardest part, is filling 7 hours of content with only a few details confirmed. Things like they have one suspect apprehended, 4 possible victims, possibly in life-threatening condition, and then you just kind of go with it.
And, in going off that, you mentioned that when you're getting all this information that's coming out to you, how do I verify whether it's correct or not? I want to go to Katie and Corinne over here, or rather Katie. How is it on the day of? Were you in the newsroom when getting all this information? Like, how do you keep up to date with what's true and what's false when all this stuff is coming right at you?
Yeah, we had a point person who we said everything that we get is going to go through him, and everything that we got, we just said, hey, this is what we just saw. he automatically was just the person that was able to look at it and say, is this reliable source? Is this not? And from there, that was then relayed out to the booth. It was relayed out to the anchors. It was relayed to the reporters. And I think it was an amazing system that we had. I was on social media. We had other people on social media, and just all the information that we were getting, having one person there to really decide whether or not that's something that we can go with, and was great. It was great.
Now, we touched a lot on the emotional feelings that you as a producer, Aaron, are feeling. Rob, you needed to go on site. Corinne, we talked before, and your shift ended while this was going on, and you were, I believe, a viewer at home watching all this take place. So, what is it for you emotionally, knowing all these protocols, knowing what these reporters are going through, what the newsroom is going through, and also watching it from the perspective of a spectator, like, man, what is going on here? Like, talk about that, how that was for you.
Yeah, I felt helpless. Like, I knew that what was going on in that newsroom. Once I figured out what was happening, I was on my way home and I saw a sheriff's deputy and a KHQ rig just flying down the highway. Sorry, boss, they were going really fast. But it was just, I was like, wow, there's something going on there. And I was kind of like joking about it because, you never think something like this is ever going to happen to like your city or whatever. And so I get home and I see this and I turn on my TV and they're live already by like 10 o'clock. And I just am frozen in front of the TV all day. As long as they were on air, I was sitting in front of it just like taking it all in and thinking, well, what do I need to know since I wasn't called in, so what can I do to help them from home? So I was going through Twitter and sending in emails of tweets that were coming out from like the governor and all these people, and just trying to do the best that I could, and then thinking ahead to like, what about tomorrow? What do I need to know about tomorrow? I was almost gonna come in and talk to Dan, like, what should I get in my head today to do my show in the morning, and like, what do people want to know, and how do I do this? And it's like a lot to take in.
Yeah, I totally imagine that. And professors, this gives me a good opportunity to segue to you. Well, first of all, is this your first encounter with a tragic event? Would you say, everyone up there?
Of that magnitude.
Of that magnitude, right. And I know we talked beforehand, professors, that you've covered Moses Lake. You talked about Oklahoma, I believe, the bombing happened there, plane crashes, I think you mentioned. For them, having this be their first experience, and you having experienced this many times, unfortunately, Corinne mentioned that she never thought this was going to happen to her city, but do you keep that in mind when you're teaching your students that this could happen and here's what you need to know about it?
Yeah, I teach a class called Television and Social Justice, and we actually do a whole unit on Columbine. We read a book by David Cullen called Columbine, and we look at the lessons learned from that incident. We look at how it really was a pivotal news event that shaped how we cover, how we name and don't name, how we cover and recognize that you're needing to interview people who are not only children but also victims of trauma. And so Columbine really changed how media approaches mass shooting incidents like this and how law enforcement does dramatically. And so we actually spent a lot of time in class talking about covering trauma, and talked a lot about how mistakes made there and how we can learn from those mistakes.
And how encouraging that as we're listening to our alumni talk about their performance, with the behaviors they engaged in, the actions they took, we're kind of nodding our heads like, you were paying attention, good. And it's wonderful to know that that's pretty much the way the program is set up. That we're not guessing about these things. We're not trying to teach you that I'm pretty sure this is the theory. It comes from a place that we know exists. That sadly, these kinds of things are going to face our alumni all the time. And it's just refreshing with all the awful things going on to know that at least we have made progress in covering tragedy. And again, one of the great reasons why I wanted to memorialize this conversation and share the lessons that they learned with those who are coming after them.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about the beginning of what took place, what were going through your minds, and then moving into the scenes. But we actually have our tweet suite available because there are people that have tweeted in questions for us. So we want to look at it from a different perspective, ask different questions. So like I said, we have tweets available for us in the tweet suite. Now it's time to go to our Opila suite specialist, Ashley Cito, who's going to be sharing what some of those questions are. Ashley?
Thank you so much, Julian, and thank you to everyone who sent in tweets. We love hearing your feedback and we love getting questions from you guys. So our first question comes from Mike Jacques, and he was wondering, how hard is it to not let your own feelings get involved with covering a tragedy?
And you're on site, how do you separate, like, my God, this is what's going on, for, like, I'm Rob, I need to talk about this, I need to tell you the news?
Yeah. Well, I think we were talking before the show, Tamara brought up that there is, it sounds perverse, but there is sort of an adrenaline rush that kind of gets you through those first hours because you're just learning so many details and you have so many people that are relying on you to get that information out that you don't really, at least I didn't really feel sad for that first day. The impact of it sets in the next day, and I think that's okay. You know, you have different people who say different things about sharing your own reflections after the fact, but to me, like, we can all editorialize about a shooting. Like, we can all agree that this is traumatic. And so the next day I was reporting on the status of the victims who were in the hospital and their conditions, and I just kind of took a minute and just sort of reflected on what I saw yesterday, the students that I saw coming out, what I was seeing on their faces as they were bringing up these names of the students who were in the hospital. And I think that's okay to have a minute and to let your viewers see that you're a human who's being impacted by this too. And I think that actually establishes trust. I think it shows that you're not just a robot spitting out facts that were handed to you through a press release, that you were there interpreting this and really conveying it to the world.
Got it. Now, I wish if we had more time, we could spend time talking to all of you about this one particular question, but we do have another tweet that Ashley has ready for us. So, Ashley, let's hear the tweet.
Our next tweet is from our EP's good friend, Katie Feller, and she was asking, how do you think reporters can cover stories on the scene and still stay safe? Do you see this as an issue?
Yeah, professors,
Do you remember the drill we did at Creme?
Oh boy, this was amazing.
Somehow I talked corporate. I was the news director and Dan was my managing editor, and somehow I talked them into allowing us to practice a mass shooting incident. The sheriff's department was drilling, and so I let my whole staff know they would be called in on a Saturday, but we brought everybody in and practiced covering a mass shooting incident at a school. And one thing I did was I hired a crew to shoot us.
wow.
And I will never forget watching that video and watching from the gunman's perch, watching them follow my crew, who was just trying to get the story that was completely not contained and in danger. I have never forgot that image. Do you remember that as well?
So completely. and it was after another thing that I had covered, and I'm harken back to what Rob was saying about when you get on the scene and you're just filled with adrenaline, you go into reporter mode. This particular case was a man had kidnapped his infant son, and he is holed up in a car in a hotel parking lot. My photographer and I pulled off the road, and we actually hopped up on top of the live rig. And we had the best view of this thing, and I don't think any of our competitors had that kind of a view. An officer came up who I knew, and he said, "You got a good look at him, Dan?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I can fill the frame of this thing." He says, "Well, he's probably got a pretty good look at you too." And I want to live. I don't want to get shot. It was just that adrenaline, as Rob was talking about, that you don't think about those things unless somebody reminds you in class, perhaps, to think about those things.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. How do you think about that, though? You know, I mean, it's just like, how do you get into that mindset in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, by being thoughtful, by having a dynamic leader as your boss, I think, making it part of the culture. And our mantra to the crew was, "You're no good to me if you're injured."
True.
And that was a little gallows humor there. But we never ever wanted anybody to put themselves in harm's way just to get the story. And that was the culture. And I hope that all the staff always knew that. We're not even fooling around about this.
I don't think a lot of people realize sometimes, how chaotic scenes like that can be. I mean, I can tell you the first mass shooting I covered was 26 people shot out at Fairchild, and by the time I was one of the first people on scene, when I was first out there, the gunman was still active. They still thought there were two. I was places in that scene I never should have been. It was happening so rapidly. There wasn't time to set up a perimeter to keep media safe, to keep anyone safe. It was happening that fast. And so it's pretty easy to find yourself in those circumstances, and you're really called to, you are trying to get the best information out to families who are worried, who want to know how to reunite with their kids or want to know if their loved ones are safe. And so you are committed to that service, but I really think training is important, and then that strong leadership to make sure that you aren't putting yourself in danger, and with whatever you're saying, you're not putting first responders in danger, you're not putting students or anybody involved with that shooting in danger. And that really does take practice, forethought, and intention.
Yeah. Well, we are going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere, because coming up next we have 2 more tweets, 2 more questions, and also we have a short news clip from our Spokane County Sheriff Ozzie Knezevich weighing in on his opinion for why these school shootings took place and who's to blame. Don't go anywhere. You're watching GUTV's Covering Tragedy.
Go Zags!
Go Zags! Go Zags!
Go Zags!
Go Zags!
Go Zags!
Go Zags!
Go Zags!
Until next time, I'm Greg Talbot. Go Zags! Go Zags!
Go Zags!
Good morning, beautiful.
Hey, I like your smile. Great job. Keep up the good work.
Hey, your shirt looks really good on you.
And this here is the kindest girl on Gonzaga's campus. You're the best. I love GU.
Welcome back. We have 2 more tweets coming up for us, so why don't we go to Ashley and find out what our next tweet/question is. Ashley?
Thank you, Julian. Our next question for our alumni is from Julia Hurley, and she's asking, how are you able to separate your personal bias from the facts and information of a story?
Yeah, Aaron, you know, as the captain of the ship, the executive producer of the show, how do you do that?
Oh man, you know, it's difficult. I won't lie to you. I mean, everybody has their own interpretation of things that go on in our community and the stories that we cover. But you have to rely on the facts. So you have to rely on the sheriff who's confirming information. A good other resource is talking to people that saw this scene, that were there, that can give their perspective. When other people can weigh in, that kind of takes that coverage away from how the media can kind of put their own influence on it. And so it's just sticking to, here's what we know, here's the facts, this is who said it, this is who confirmed it. But I will say there was one thing that was different with Freeman, and that was there was no doubt that our team was suffering with this. And so we were able to be raw with our community and say, you know, this is a tragedy. We can label this a tragedy, and we can say that this is awful, and we can say that our hearts go out to this community, because that wasn't crossing any lines. That was just showing that we're people too, and we're human, and we're dealing with this as well. I mean, people often think that the media just are these terrible people that have no feelings towards the things that they cover, that we just want to cover crime, we just want to do it for ratings, and that's just not true, and especially in local journalism. Like, our mission is to help our community, to solve problems, to answer the questions that they might not have the resources to do that with, and in this case, we were healing with them as well. And so it was just this somber mood the whole day and for the week following, and we were allowed to kind of take that stance with our community.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about the perception of what the public thinks of media, but we're going to save that for a little later. Why don't we go to our next tweet and see what the question is? Ashley?
Our last tweet comes from a current GUTV student. Her name's Bree Vasquez, and she was wondering, how do you deliver the story in a way that is respectful to those that have been impacted by the tragedy while still telling the whole story?
Corinne, Katie, what are your thoughts on that?
Hearing that question, it's kind of like your heart's like, oh man, because that's what was going through our mind was, well, what do people want to know, but how far can you go before people are like, okay, too much? Just like how much coverage is too much, I guess, until you're weighing on people like, yeah, we know that one of our students died and 3 are in the hospital. And
is there protocol for that? Are there rules to follow? Is there a rule book for how to cover this?
I think it just was a conversation we had in the morning. So when do we cover this part, and when do we cover like how the community is healing and all this other, like just weighing that out. It was difficult. But yeah, it was just a conversation we had to have.
Yeah. Katie, do you have any thoughts? Oh, sorry. Erin?
I was just going to say that when covering tragedy, there's no right or wrong way to do it. There's no standard protocol because every situation is different. And like she said, these were conversations that we had to have in our newsroom. And at my station, I'm one of 4 managers, and I'm the youngest, and I'm the one with the least amount of experience. But I have my news director and my assistant news director who have gone through these tragedies before, so they understand somewhat of a protocol. They know kind of our stance and what our ethics are at our station. But, it's just with the details that were unfolding, this was a situation that we really hadn't experienced in Spokane. And so you just kind of have to know that it's kind of go with the flow. There are going to be people that appreciate your coverage. There are going to be people that don't like your coverage, and they're going to turn their TVs off. And you just have to recognize that you need to do what you think is ethically right and what you think is moral, and kind of just go with your gut on that.
And just to interject real quickly, I think I understand what you're saying about no wrong way but I've seen many wrong ways to cover tragedies, and a lot of them are outlined in the book that Tamara has all the students read, that Columbine book, which was so refreshing to me watching you on every channel in Spokane. There was a GUTV alum doing it the right way. I was so very pleased. Of course not at the situation, but pleased that because of the situation, you guys shone through and you handled it like a sensitive Gonzaga alum ought to.
I have to echo that. I had the privilege of being out on scene covering the story as well. And Rob was out there when I got on scene. Dana Marie was out there. I ran into Katie at Juvenile Hall where the suspect was being detained, and seeing their demeanor and how you all were interacting, and the tone and compassion that you were exhibiting at the same time while needing to get information quickly and gather it. I was so proud of all of you.
Katie?
Yeah. One of the things that I was most proud of that day was our news director took the time by herself, went to Poynter. And Poynter is one of the ethical journalists. That's who we look to. And she just took the time, she went through Poynter, and then it was kind of let's pause our day real quick, and let's make sure that what we're doing from here on out is the right thing. And let's just take a second, make sure that what we're doing isn't going to hurt anyone, make sure we're doing it right. And I tell you, once we had that meeting, I was the proudest employee to be at KHQ because we took the time to make sure we weren't going to hurt anyone and that we were going to do it right.
No, that's great to hear. I actually looked at Poynter before this, and it really is just a great resource for journalists, aspiring journalists like myself and other students here, and also you all journalists. And so I'm glad that time was taken. Next, we want to show a clip of Spokane Sheriff Ozzie Knezevich sort of weigh in on what he thinks about why these school shootings are becoming more and more popular, and who's to blame for it. We're going to show you about a minute clip of his 25-minute press conference. So we're leaving out a few details here, but we do want to specifically talk about two entities that he calls out: society and the media. So why don't we hear what the sheriff has to say?
This young gentleman got sucked into a counterculture of violence. a culture that is enamored with school shooting. And media, you are to blame for that, because you keep giving these people headlines. You keep using their names. You have made them heroes to some people. If I had my way, none of these people's name would ever be remembered. Sammy's name would be remembered. Joe's name might be remembered, but not the shooters. Until we start treating these people for what they are, killers, not heroes, you're going to continue this violence.
Media is to blame. I'm just going to ask this, and I want to hear your opinions. Is there any validity or truth to what Ozzie Knezovich is saying here?
I have a lot of respect for Sheriff Knezovich. I've met him on other occasions and been very, very proud of a lot of the actions that he's taken to keep us safe in this community, and I couldn't disagree with him anymore about this. As evidence, I would point to the Moses Lake shooting that we covered in 1996 was when it happened. I would say, ask the victims' families how they thought they were treated, and I would say by us at CREM. I can't take, I can't put it on any other entity, but we tried as hard as we could, and I think we did a pretty good job of not glorifying Barry Lukaitis, who was the shooter there, and I also don't believe that there's any problem in this universe that goes away by ignoring it and pretending that it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. I do understand. I believe that our sheriff was speaking from an emotional place at that point, and he cares about the people of Spokane County. I firmly believe that, but I really, really do respectfully disagree with the notion that the media, by naming a suspect, is propagating these kinds of tragedies. I believe that he's right when we say we should remember the victims' names. And I remember the victims' names of that Moses Lake shooting, Manuel Vela and Arnie Fritz and Leona Kairos and Natalie Hintz. And I think we did as good a job as we could of memorializing them while not making a hero out of their killer. It is possible. And frankly, it's our job.
Mm-hmm. Tamara?
I think there are lots of small decisions you can make that can take steps not to elevate a mass shooter. I think you absolutely have to name. And so this whole movement that you don't ever name, reporters need to report what they know when they know it. When you get into ongoing coverage, I think small decisions you can make, what kind of shoulder graphics, how you name the coverage going on, moving forward. Does this become the Caleb Sharp, who is the shooter case, as this matriculates through, or does it stay as a Freeman shooting? So his name doesn't become a common household name. There are small decisions you can make in coverage, especially in a case like this where the shooter's still alive, where there will be an ongoing litigation, probably civil and criminal. There are small decisions we can make that aren't going to elevate the shooter as much. And I think in general, the media has done a much better job in those small decisions. I can tell you, I think every single one of these students is going to be very thoughtful about the kind of shoulder graphics, the kind of images they use when they go back and a year from now are covering the anniversary of this, what they show and don't show. So I think we've learned a lot. And again, I think Columbine was that kind of pivotal case for both law enforcement and the media. So I think there are small things that we're doing a much better job on. I can't name the Virginia Tech shooter's name. Can any of you? And that was probably the first mass shooting, of that scale after. That was a direct lesson learned from Columbine.
Yeah. And I want to ask the four of you, and this is open to anyone really, when you have someone like a high-profile person like Ozzie Knezovich call you all out, a lot of people believe him and a lot of people agree with him. I know there was this growing animosity towards the media for a lot of reasons, but how does it make you feel when someone's saying like you're not doing the right thing when you're doing your job?
Very frustrated. And let me start by saying thank you, Sheriff Knezovich, and all of the law enforcement officers who were there that day. They worked very hard and they were very brave and did things that I would not be able to do. And having said that, we've all been talking about how many of us didn't sleep, and we were there all day trudging through a lot of the same stuff to do a different but still very important service to the community. And so then to hear him say that it's somehow our fault for doing our job, I think is very disappointing in a civil servant who should be representing everyone in the community.
I think the frustrating part too is, I mean, obviously in that clip he was still learning the news and he was dealing with tragedy as well. And we work with the sheriff's department almost every day. They come to us when they need help identifying somebody that's still out in the community. If there is a suspect on the loose and they need to find that person, they'll send that person's picture to us and we'll put it out on our platforms because we have those resources. So they do rely on us for a lot of things. So to make that comment, it was frustrating because we work in tandem nearly every day.
So then why did he say that then? I mean, I didn't even know that this intricate personal relationship was going on between media and the sheriff's office. Why would he say that knowing how you work with each other?
So we had a reporter who went, and the second that press conference was over, she got onto the phone and called him and was like, why did you say that? How could you say that? We've been talking this whole time. We've been listening to the instructions that you've been giving us on how we should be approaching some of this. And his immediate response was, oh, no, it wasn't you. It was the national media I was talking about.
So there was a distinction he was making there.
But I think Dan put it the best way. If he's going to say that, why didn't he get up on his same platform and say that it wasn't us?
What was frustrating, I was working for NBC for the NBC Nightly News that night and the Today Show, so I'll own the national media part. What was frustrating to me was, I think I saw the superintendent from Freeman, Randy, hugging all of us and thanking us for our sensitivity, for the tone and how we were conveying information, how we were treating family members. I heard that from multiple law enforcement officers out on the scene. So I do think Ozzy was very emotional. I can say, as I was on scene in the first day, right after he had notified Amy Strahan that her son had been killed, he was very emotional, turned to all of us in the press pool and said, I just did this, I'm emotional, be gentle on me. And we were. I saw no distinction, I don't know how, between the national media there and the local media, which is positive because I have been in other scenes where maybe the national media, who isn't as invested in a community, has been coarser or a little bit more tough with victims of trauma. Did you see?
So it's kind of just hearing that the media is the problem. It hurts because this is our career, this is our passion, this is what we want to do. And it's, people will say that like during political times, like the media is covering the wrong thing. And so I get personally like kind of hurt by that because that is me. The national or local, it's me. And just like saying the police are bad, like all the police are bad. That hurts all of them, and it just kind of affects us the same way. I don't.
Right. Well, thank you everyone for being here today. You know, I don't think 30 minutes does a conversation like this justice. 30 minutes, 30 hours, 30 days even. But thank you all for being here today and having this conversation with us. We appreciate it, and the future broadcasters appreciate it, and you at home, we hope you enjoyed it. We hope you learned something today about what really goes through the mind of the reporter. What are they thinking about? What are they feeling? So the next time you unfortunately see a tragedy, hopefully it doesn't happen, you'll know what to expect, and rather what our reporters are expecting, and you hopefully won't judge them as harshly as it's been done so far in the past couple weeks. So thank you for tuning in today. You just watched a GUTV special on covering tragedy. There will be more GUTV shows coming up. The Advanced Group has many shows planned for you all. But thank you very much for being here tonight. My name is Julian Moreno, and have a great evening.